CrossFit is being attacked again in the scientific community. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a recent publication that discusses CrossFit training and does it in a way that's just not right. They fabricate claims, they fabricate citations, and they just misrepresent so much research out there. And it is some really shaky science. If you want to dive deeper into this, the link of this video will have my full article that I put out on CrossFit.com. But let's dive into this review of this research review article called CrossFit, a multidimensional analysis of physiological adaptations, physiological benefits, and strategic considerations for optimal training. So this article claims that it is going to summarize all the research we can find on CrossFit to help guide safer and more effective training, which appears to be a pretty cool thing when you hear that from a goals perspective of an article. So I was excited when I started to read this. But the problem was when I started to read it, it became really clear that this was a very biased research article. It wasn't done in a way that was open-minded, at least on my first read. And then when I started to dive deeper, it got pretty nasty. So I'm going to show you kind of the couple of the few key hits here. I'm not going to hit all of them, but I want to hit a few that I think are most representative of what's happened here in this article. So first off, the word injury appears 38 times in this peer-reviewed article. 38 times, and it's often framed like this. Critics highlight concerns about injury rates, particularly among novices, blah, blah, blah. If we're going to talk about it that many times, 38 times, should we not look at research that already exists around CrossFit injury rates, such as the Hack et al. 2013 article here? That makes sense, right? Well, of course, this author didn't do that. So they bring up all these concerns about injury, but they don't bring up any of the huge number of research articles that we currently have on CrossFit injury rates that you can see there on the right. And actually, since I'm hitting these slides, another article just came out as well, showing low injury rates again. So we have two systematic reviews, one in 2017, one in 2020, both of which say that CrossFit injury rates are similar to sports like weightlifting, powerlifting, track and field, rugby, football, ice hockey, soccer, gymnastics. When you compare CrossFit training to other forms of recreational physical activity, you are going to see very similar injury rates. And so from a research perspective, we should be past that. And it just really seems disingenuous to bring up those concerns of injury rates and to not at least glance at this research a little bit. So when I read that, that's kind of what got my interest peaked here and made me want to dive a little bit deeper into the actual research on this publication. So I'm going to jump ahead a couple ones here. And what I want to highlight here is just how many times the author in this study makes a bold claim and then provides a citation for it. And that's what we typically do in research articles, is we want to provide evidence that supports our stances. So in this one, for example, he claims that Tabana and D'Souza in 2018 identified rotator cuff strains and patellar tendinopathies as common issues often linked to repetitive overhead lifts like the snatch and high volume squatting. The problem here is that if you go to that 2018 article that was referenced there, it had nothing to do at all with the claim that this author of this research article said. And that's a repeated thing throughout this article. He makes a claim, provides a citation, and that citation doesn't have anything to do with it. That is not how science is done. That is how you BS your way through science. Another example of that here is he talks about CrossFit burnout and that CrossFit leads to burnout, citing this Drum 2017 study that 35% of CrossFitters experience burnout within 2 years. The Drum study did not look at burnout rates at all, didn't mention a 35% statistic at all. So where's that information coming from? And in fact, later in this article, Dr. Ferdinando states that CrossFit gyms buffer against workout monotony and reduce dropout rates, which hover around 15% in CrossFit compared to 50% in traditional gyms. So those seem to be like almost contradictory statements. And again, using improper citations here. Another one here, that the CrossFit movements, the weightlifting and gymnastics expose participants to unique biomechanical risk. I don't disagree that the movements, the biomechanics here are incredibly important. That CrossFit does use the movements that we don't see in traditional fitness, but CrossFit's always going to say dial in the mechanics, then consistency, then intensity. And so to say that and then provide a citation of Rios 2024, which also has nothing to do with the claims that this article makes, is just wrong and BS. Another one here claiming that new CrossFitters get injured more. And again, the research article that's provided here does not have anything to do with that claim. Claim number 8 here, constantly varied programming leads to injuries, citing Foster 2017, where it says that a periodized model lowers injury risk by 35%. Guess what? Foster 2017 did not look at what this author claimed. And in fact, I'd actually say that one of the things that might actually be great about CrossFit is because it doesn't follow periodized program, because we're not seeing the same squat variation show up every single week. We're seeing constantly varied weights, load, time durations. The tissues that we hit in CrossFit are always hit slightly differently, which might actually have a slightly positive benefit from an injury rate perspective. That's my theory. And I'm telling you, it's a theory. I'm not going to give you a BS citation like this author does to back his stuff up. This is one of my favorite ones here. This is the one that when I read this, I was like, oh, I really understand that something is wrong in your methodology and how you went about writing this research article here. So in this one, he claims that a 2023 pilot study used EMG sensors and motion capture reduced ACL injuries by 40%. So let me tell you why this is wrong. Number one, ACL injuries in CrossFit are incredibly rare. In fact, I primarily treat CrossFit athletes in my physical therapy practice. I've never seen one happen where an athlete tore their ACL in CrossFit. No, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that this is like the 1 in a million injury that we see here. People tear their ACL playing sports, skiing, things like that. They don't tear them in CrossFit outside of rare exceptions. So that's weird that we can reduce them by 40%, because that would be really hard to study. But he actually says that this happened in a pilot study, and he doesn't provide a citation for this. But we need to understand what a pilot study is. This is a really small group of participants that we run prior to doing a full study protocol to just understand if the protocol that we have in place is feasible to do or not. We aren't doing a pilot study to come up with great statistical analysis of something like reductions of ACL tears. When I read this, I knew that this was a complete lie. There's no way that happens. No. We should be concerned about the lifelong CrossFit participation and heart health. This was another one that seems pretty predatory here. So he mentions this Tabana 2017 study that showed a 12% reduction in resting systolic blood pressure, and then later says that because of these elevated cardiac troponin levels, we should be raising concern about the lifelong CrossFit participation, which, of course, the theme of this video here, the Tabana 2017 study didn't measure what he said it was measuring there. But to say that we should be concerned about lifelong health of participants, like we're going to damage their heart by doing CrossFit, it is just crazy, because we know from so much research that when we elevate people's VO2 max, when we improve their aerobic conditioning, we see dramatic improvements in heart health. And to make that bold claim is just crazy. Another bold claim that I just don't like and gives me the icks as a physical therapist is saying that we should be worried about the risk such as joint degeneration by having people participate in CrossFit, which if you dive into the research on properly dosed exercise, it's pretty clear that properly dosed exercise is really good for your joint health long-term. And to not bring up any of that and just throw out this random risk without any evidence to back you up there is garbage from a perspective of being a researcher here. Here's the one that really set me down this path, though. As when I first read it, I thought, man, this was a very biased article. But when I read this claim, it made me dive deeper. So Slagle 2020 demonstrated that structured technique workshops reduce injury rates by 25%. So when I read that, I got excited. I was like, well, let me dive into this research article to actually see what they did and talked about that led to a 25% reduction. Because as somebody that travels around the country teaching courses on keeping CrossFitters in the gym, that was really exciting for me to read. Here's the problem. I actually read Slagle 2020. It wasn't a research study on 200 CrossFitters. It was another research review. So they were just looking at concurrent training strategies and how that could be implemented into CrossFit's methodology. So it had nothing to do with technique workshops. Didn't mention 25% injury risk reduction. And in fact, didn't even have a cohort of CrossFitters because it wasn't a research study. It was a review article. So I actually emailed the author about this. So I said, hey, what's up? I would like to read this citation to actually know what these researchers did that reduced injury rates by 25%. And in his reply, he admitted that reference does not contain a specific experimental finding. He acknowledged that those claims cannot be substantiated. He said that he cannot currently verify the original source for the claims, but that the broader points remain valid. That's disgusting. That you as a researcher make a bold claim in a peer-reviewed article, you admit that your citation was wrong, but you can't find where you got it from. But it doesn't matter that you don't know where you got it from, because my opinion is still correct, is essentially what he's saying here. Here's the problem, folks. Bad science just doesn't hurt CrossFit. It hurts public health. This is the type of article that can get cited over and over and over with other people saying, other peer-reviewed research has said that CrossFit could be bad for your health. It creates a snowball effect. When academic work misrepresents data and misrepresents readers, and it damages a movement like CrossFit that is helping thousands of individuals reclaim their health. This isn't what science is. It's a shame. Again, I have this full article in the description of this video if you want to dive deeper into these claims.